Welcome to another Monday of
No One Gets Away With Anything.
Today with you we are
Jose Rafael Ochoa-Neri.
and Ariana Lopez.
I mean, we are getting to become masters at this. Yes.
I think it's a matter of also the pace. Como,
Yeah, the rhythmic
exacto,
of it.
como las transiciones, pues que tú termines y ya estoy empezando.
We finish each other's.
Sentences.
You should have said sandwiches. Did you see that episode of Friends?
I've never heard that before. No.
It's an episode of Friends where they're like, because she finishes, we finish each other's sandwiches. It's like, oh my God.
We have a very, like, I don't know if philosophical is the word for this. Como technical.
It's weird. It's where philosophical meets technical.
It's like it's a combination between logic and philosophy.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something about we had two different ideas.
Exactly.
We started the day with two different ideas, and for some reason we ended up wanting to talk about the same thing. So basically, we were going to talk about incentives and expectations.
Mm-hmm. And how does that like generate an output or a result?
Or satisfaction.
Exactly.
Okay, so in the case of incentives, we have the result is always there's always a result in the end, and then with expectations, the outcome, or if you want to call it some ways, is satisfaction.
Exactly.
Okay. So what would you define as an expectation, so that we have it clear?
Yeah, basically, expectations are somehow a forecast of an event or a project or anything that you do in your life that you have somehow a certainty that it will happen in the future. Okay? And your forecast is about how that's going to go.
Okay, so it's our internal weather app for life. Like
Exactly.
You think it's going to rain tomorrow. You're not sure, but the app tells you that it might.
Exactamente.
Okay.
And then the satisfaction is basically the fulfillment that you obtain from that certain event, project.
Yeah, from that expectation
result.
being met or not.
Yeah, or like basically the fulfillment you get from the object of that expectation.
Okay.
Come on, you have an object, right? And then you have on one side expectation of how this object is gonna be in the future, right? And if you're talking like expectations are past, object is present, and then satisfaction is future, right? And then the satisfaction looks at the past and says like, okay, is this better or worse than what I expected, and how fulfilled am I because of that?
Yeah. Okay. And on the other hand, incentives are a bit more technical. One of the books over there called oh my God, what's the name of that book?
I get it. Read it right now.
No, yes, we talked about it. We talked about this book.
Thinking
It's the book
Fast
about
and Slow?
No, Thinking Fast and Slow is the one on the top.
Why Nations Fail.
Why Nations Fail. Thank you so much. Why Nations Fail talks a lot about incentives. Incentives are basically the structures that an organization or that a project has that push you in one direction or another in terms of doing things. So, for example, you have an incentive to get up and do your job because they pay you, for example. Or you have an incentive to, if you want to look at it at really technical terms, you have an incentive to treat your couple right because they treat you right back, you know? Or you have an incentive to watch a soccer game because then you are going to have this surge of serotonin or dopamine from watching your team win. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So these are all incentives. For example, there's incentives to donate to charity, so they pardon some of your taxes. All these things are called incentives, and they inspire always a result. They try to influence people to go towards a particular result. And generally, in this case, we talk more about lack of incentives or wrongly thought out incentives than negative. It's more like, well, you didn't do your job right, you know?
Exactly. Incentive is like a driver of something. Come on, what drives you to act a certain way, and then the result is what comes after the action.
I have a question for you. If you had to look at your life, what would be your worst incentive, or an incentive that you think has brought you to do stuff that you don't particularly enjoy or that wasn't right for you at that moment?
Maybe being skinny.
Oh my God, that's dark. I mean, okay, yeah, definitely true. That's a good one.
There was definitely a point in my life where my number one incentive and priority was to be skinny.
Be skinny.
And everything else it revolved around that. And the result was achieved.
Yeah, the result was achieved to the detriment of your own health.
Exacto, pero técnicamente it was a positive result.
Yeah.
It was aligned with my incentive.
So, like, okay, that's one of the things about incentives. So let's start there. Let's start with incentives. So the thing about incentives is that they aren't positive or negative, morally speaking, objectively speaking, for society. They are positive and negative insofar as they managed to fulfill the goal or to create the result that they're looking for. So if she was looking to be to be skinny, and she would go to any lengths to do it, then technically speaking,
the result was
achieved, and so the incentive did its job properly. But you should take into consideration, if you want to actually be able to do things and not collapse, you have to take care of the body that you're working at. I'm going to give you the first example. So if your incentive is wrong, if your incentive is, let's put it this way, if your incentive is either not specific enough,
okay,
or your incentive is just plain wrong.
Come on, not aligned.
Not aligned with the result that you want to achieve, then you would get something like you would get an what would be the result that you get? So that would be a question. So how do you think that would work? So if I give an incentive to a child, for example at camp, and I give them an incentive to be active. So for example, I tell them every time that you run around the football course, I will give you a piece of candy. Like, what would happen? What do you think would happen?
He would end up running the court as many times as you ask him for.
Well, I'm not asking anymore. The incentive is set up. It works on its own. So every time he runs the field, I have to give him one.
He's going to infinitely run until he cannot keep running.
Okay, and then what would be my result? What was my desired result?
For him to run the court.
For him to be more active.
Right.
So if I make him run the court 12,000 billion times, then at the end, he'll be so tired. He'll spend 2 days without doing anything. So my result isn't truly achieved. It would be something like that. And I think the most palpable example of this is FIFA. So FIFA has been in a bit of a... It's been in hot water for years, but now it's come out more blatantly. There's a couple of documentaries, one on HBO, which is really more of a journalistic perspective, and then there's one in Netflix, which is a Netflix-style documentary. It's the best one I've ever seen done. Okay. In terms of the amount of people that they interviewed. Okay. So the president of FIFA was called Sepp Blatter. They interviewed him. They interviewed the new president called Di Fantino. Okay. They interviewed the FBI agents in charge of the case. They interviewed almost everyone involved, and they got really good accounts of everything. And
how is it called?
It's called FIFA Uncovered.
Okay.
So it turns out that what they're talking about is that the 2018 and 2020 World Cups and even the 2010 World Cup were all bought. Okay. So 2012, 2020, 2014, and 2018 and 2022, all of them had some aspect of bribery like put into it. And the thing is, what they talk about is that FIFA has a way of selecting who goes. So countries make bids to go, and then the exec board, which is like the presidents of each confederation. The confederations are each area of the world. So CONCACAF is Caribbean and the North Atlantic. Then there's CONMEBOL, which is Latin America. There's the Asian one. There's the UEFA, which is Europe. So each president has like a vote or a couple of votes, depending on the amount of countries that you have. And they decide where the World Cup goes, depending on which bid is on the table. And so it turns out that when they were doing this, somebody figured out at some point that you could basically bribe them. And since they're so little people and there's no real supervision to them, they can get away with murder. They can basically get as many bribes as they want. And so my argument is FIFA wanted the World Cup to be a universal thing, and it set up its incentives in such a way that was so unspecific that it led to it falling into corruption. Like the easiest way to get a World Cup was to buy it.
Fair enough.
Okay? That's the first one for me, at least.
And also, for example, like cliché para nosotros, la oposición venezolana. What do you want? To take away the government. Come on, bring them down. Okay.
What do you need?
What does that mean?
Yeah.
Nobody knows. How? Nobody knows.
What are you do? What incentives are you putting out for that?
What are you gonna do if you do it? Nobody knows.
Anything.
So evidently the result has not been positive. And it's not been aligned with the incentive in the first place.
Okay, yeah. I agree, 100%.
And it's completely broad, completely not defined. And also, yeah, like way too subjective in order to achieve actually a result.
Okay, so then that begs the question, what would you need for a positive result? What do we need in order to have the result match the incentives?
Okay, I think that like taking into account what we both mentioned, es como you need an in-between between como especificidad sin llegar a ser muy específico.
Tan explícito, pues.
For example, let's say you want to get fit. This is the most like traditional example, right? And you tell yourself, I am going to go to the gym 6 hours this week, and I'm going to do this, and that, okay? The moment you fail in any of those specific tasks, you're probably going to be disencouraged because you were planning on a system that was very, very, very well defined, but at the same time did not allow space for mistakes.
Yeah, so if we recorded and said that we would record at 3:30 and something went wrong, we wouldn't want to record anymore.
Exacto.
Okay.
O ya, o sea, ponte tú que hubiésemos dicho, como from 3:30 to 4:30 we record episode 1. From 4:30 to 4:45 we stop and we record episode 2 from 4:45 to 5:30.
It's 8.
Exactly. And we're starting to record the second one, okay? Yeah. And the moment like something goes wrong, everything else goes wrong. So if your incentives are, okay, that's not even an incentive, that's a plan.
Yeah. But plans require incentives.
Claro.
Incentives are like, you ever did cell reproduction?
Sí.
So like you need the RNA and the DNA.
Exacto.
Okay, your in order to communicate, cells need RNA. Mm-hmm. They split themselves in half, copy half of it, and you can reproduce the whole thing. Yeah. So it's the same thing with plans. Plans are DNA. Incentives are RNA. It's the thing that you split, copy everywhere, so that everybody can do it.
That's as nerdy as the explanation.
That's the nerdiest and best well-made metaphor I've ever made, man. Yes. Yes. Uh-huh. That was so good. Oh my God. I need a moment.
Big brain moment. Bueno, no importa, las dejamos a él con los nerds so we can keep talking.
if you understood what I said, you're one of, like, you're here.
The idea is for people to understand, not to like show off. Pero está bien, we're gonna accept. Pero a lo que voy. Es que you have incentives, you have results, but there's also the plan we had not talked about.
Yeah.
Okay, entonces your incentive has to be well defined. Okay, but then your plan cannot be that well defined.
Yeah, it has to have
room for error.
That economic notion of the invisible hand.
Exacto.
Okay.
Why?
Because it has to correct itself. So if you go to the gym, it has to be, I have to go to the gym until I'm tired. Mm-hmm. And so it's not until I can't move anymore. Mm-hmm. Because sometimes that goal, for example, it could be 45 minutes for you, it could be 3 hours for me, it could be 10 minutes for me. Mm-hmm. And you would get there at different moments. Sí. So if you tell a professional bodybuilder that he has to, pull up 50 kilograms of weight every day, he's going to do it. He does it every day. Mm-hmm. Like if you tell that to a scrawny 6-year-old to do it, he's going to damage his muscles. Mm-hmm. What I mean is that there has to be some, if you have a plan, there has to be an adaptability to the people who are going to receive these plans.
Okay, sí.
Because not everybody can do it to the same ability. Sí, like if I ask you to set up the audio for the podcast, no. Whenever I do it, she stands around like, can I help you with anything?
Es que bueno, el X cable with like the Y como receptor, and I'm like, how can I be helpful in here?
And then she comes in with some topics and I'm like, what do you mean?
And then I'm like, I think we need to talk about something. Come on. I think we need to reframe the whole thing.
And I'm like, what? So it requires the adaptability of the people who are doing it. Same. That's how college works.
Sí, bueno, pero exacto, lo que iba es como que if it's too defined, tienes muy poco espacio para los errores. And there's going to be mistakes.
Okay.
Lots of them. We know.
Yeah.
So we usually take 2 hours.
Yeah.
To set up. Okay? But also if it's too undefined, como I just want to exercise.
Then you might not.
Never gonna exercise.
Yeah, you go down the stairs and you're like, enough for today. Yeah.
Exacto. Por ejemplo, para mí, o sea, I was setting an unrealistic expectation, creo, que era ir al gimnasio 5 veces a la semana, living in Madrid by myself, having to take care of stuff.
You're crazy.
Imposible.
Like, it's not crazy to want to do it. It's crazy to think that we can do it like with the lives that you and I have
Sí, exacto.
at the moment.
O sea, en Caracas podía hacer ejercicio 6 veces a la semana. Relajado, bro. O sea, relajado no, pero I could.
You could do it.
I could manage. Aquí...
You had a car, for one.
I did it at home. And I had weights at my house. I had the whole equipment. Como, I really could just wake up and exercise. That was going to take me 15 minutes.
Like, if you're going to exercise 5 times a week, you need to go to sleep at 10 p.m. and wake up at 4.
Sí, literal.
It's the only way.
And if you have a relationship, no.
That doesn't work. You
posible.
never sleep at 10 p.m.
Exacto. Or wake up at 4 in the morning.
None of them work.
I learned that I'm way more likely to go to the gym 3 or even 4 times a week. And if I go 4 times a week, I feel
like a goddess.
Like I'm at my peak. I'm on my peak, which is related to expectations.
Okay, so what about expectations? So what do we do? What happens? In which circumstances we get the most positive expectations?
The most positive expectations?
Yes, the most positive expectations. Where do we get them from?
Bueno, when you have like a lot of faith in whatever isn't going to happen.
Whatever isn't going to happen.
Is going to happen.
Okay, so give me an example.
It's what we were talking about before. Let's say you're doing a project, right? And there's a project where you're putting a lot of effort into something, and you know what's behind that essay, that event, that podcast, right? And you're giving it away, right? Either to a professor or to other people to give you feedback on it, right? And if you know you put a lot of work into it and you know it's good, your expectations of the feedback are going to be high. That's when I think you can get the highest expectations. When you have some sort of grounds.
Okay, I agree. But actually I disagree. And I disagree because of one thing, and it's the Andrew Huberman, the Huberman Lab podcast. When he talks about dopamine, he has this thing where the baseline of dopamine is where you are normally. Okay? And then it can go up or it can go down depending on what happens in your day. There are things in your life that lower your baseline, make you have less dopamine in general. For example, if you go to sleep at the wrong time, if you watch too much porn, your dopamine levels they start the baseline of dopamine like goes lower and lower and lower. It's like you're overusing the gas in your car. Okay, and so he says that one of the things that happens is that your baseline is pretty average, right?
Okay.
And when you have a negative expectation of something, your baseline lowers slightly. Okay, so it goes down a bit. It's like, oh, I'm going to have a bad time at this. I don't like these people. It's probably going to be bad. Or I have a test. I haven't studied really that much. And your baseline goes down. Okay, you have less dopamine that you normally would. Okay. And then the expectation is over, the event happens, and if the event was negative, then your baseline, it's a way that your body and your mind protects your baseline. Yeah.
Prepare for...
Like, yeah, if you're playing football and you get knocked to the side without any warning, it's really rough. If you can expect it, it'll be bad, but you probably won't be hurt, you know? And so that's a way that your brain protects itself. And then, he says, look, then you have... when you have your baseline is pretty low, you have negative expectations of what's about to happen, and then the opposite happens. The best possible outcome happens. Your levels of dopamine go up here.
Okay, but that's not expectation. That is satisfaction.
Exactly, that's my point. If your expectation is really low, and the outcome is completely opposite to your expectations, then you get it's higher. The amount of dopamine and positive emotion that you get from that is higher than having expected a positive result and getting a positive result.
Okay, your question was, how can you get the highest expectations? That's what you asked.
Did I ask that? I'm so sorry. I meant that you get the highest satisfaction.
I figured. That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. I completely agree with you. And I was telling Jose, like, I did a trip a couple of weeks ago, and we booked the flights because they were the cheapest, right? And we were like, oh, it's like a cool destination. But then we talked to people, and people were like, yeah, but if you go there low season, you're not going to have anything to do. And then we checked the weather, and the weather was horrible. And we were also told that everything was like super far away, and there was no public transportation, so we were not going to be able to do anything. We did not have a car, and we could not rent a car because we're underaged. And we actually ended up arriving. In my head, I was going to be like, we're just going to go to the beach and stay in the hotel. That was like my best case scenario. That was for me.
Awesome.
And then weather was amazing. It was way warmer than Madrid, but definitely not as warm as Margarita. which is
great.
perfecto. And then somebody wanted to rent a car for us, and we actually managed, to drive the whole island, right?
Awesome.
Amazing. And there was a lot to see, even if it was low season. And it was even better because we had the whole thing for ourselves.
Yeah. You had your own private island.
Literal. Y fue como... Also, the flights were super on time. Como I thought they were going to be super delayed. Honestly, I was like, I'm prepared for the worst. And everything went out so good that I was like, Jesus.
Yeah. It's amazing whenever that happens. I did have one the other day, which was the World Cup. For those of you who haven't or aren't watching the World Cup, you should. There's been a couple of results that have been really surprising, but the first one was Argentina versus Saudi Arabia. They were losing 1-0 in the first half of Saudi Arabia against Argentina, which was like
expected.
That's what the expectation was saying. And then the Argentina in the first half scored 3 goals that were offside. So they were all canceled because they were offside, which means that the attacker is above the defense and above the last person in the defense, and so it's not valid. The goal is not, it's literally just canceled. Okay.
Do you agree? Do you think it was actually an offside?
Yeah, there was one that's debatable because the offside actually means that because the defender is it's further away than the last defender, then he has an advantage over everybody else defending him.
Okay.
So that's the reason for it.
Okay.
This attacker was one arm in front. That's the only one that I'm saying, like, one arm, really? Like, even half a foot, I get, but an arm.
What are you going to do with the arm?
There is. I mean, you push people and you shove, but one arm is, like, too much, I think. But the point is, they got their goals canceled. And there's people way smarter than me with a lot more experience than me in football who, look at this on a camera and decide, no, that's offside. And so they called off the goals. The second half started, and what everyone expected was, 3 more goals. But some of them won't be offside this time. Saudi Arabia scored 2.
2 more?
Saudi Arabia was losing 1-0, and they won 2-1. Argentina had been 36 games unbeaten in international football. They were about to beat the world record of 37, and they lost against Saudi Arabia, a team that's not in the top 50 in the world.
Ouch.
Like, it was people in the United States and Venezuela woke up at 3 a.m., 4 a.m. to watch the game, and then literally just saw Argentina get railed. And it was amazing because nobody expected it to happen. And for example, I'm a neutral football fan in this case. In this World Cup, I don't have a real horse that I'm betting on. But watching a game of football, that magic of it just turning around, that's why people like football. You can have expectations. They're almost never going to be fulfilled. And if they are, it can even be surprising. So I think that's the best example I can find.
Absolutely. Then that's like both like... If you have positive expectations and negative outcome, basically Argentina.
Yeah,
position.
Argentina's
and if you
position.
Have, negative expectations and then a positive outcome, Saudi Arabia. Like,
imagine the disappointment you must feel after losing 36 games, a winning streak of 30. Like, wow, it must be rough. Now,
but what do you think it's like? Do you think Saudi Arabia was more excited than what Argentina was disappointed, or the other way around, or is it proportional?
I think it must be proportional.
Okay.
But I think it was way more exciting for Saudi Arabia. They declared that day a national holiday. Like the day after, the king declared it a national holiday, and each player got $2 million for winning the game, a Rolls Royce, and then they were told that if they pass the group stage of the World Cup, they will get $10 million each. I think they were more excited. Like incentives. Those. Whoa! Perfect. What a full circle moment. Yes, incentives to keep going and do it. Well, the thing is, one of the things that and it's going to connect to the last part, which we talked about in incentives and in. So we were talking about the best scenario possible. So how do we get a stable result and a positive satisfaction from our incentives and expectations? And so I think Saudi Arabia is the best example for this, which is really weird because I didn't expect it. Saudi Arabia got a new coach, which they call the White Magician, because he's been the coach for countries all over Africa.
Okay.
And Africa, the most important competition that they have is the African Cup of Nations.
Okay.
And it's a really important. The qualifying is really difficult. The African level teams are really, really, really violent, physical.
Okay.
Like it's you see the matches and it's full. This World Cup has been full of that, like physically strong, difficult matches as compared to Europe's more technical. Yeah, I wouldn't even say diplomatic. Like they hit each other too, but it's more technical. Like, oh, the perfect pass.
Okay.
These guys run like you wouldn't believe, and like
if they come to you, you have no way of getting away.
Yeah, no, and it's really difficult to defend against them, right? And so European football plays a lot more regularly, and it has very, very talented players, and so they became very technical because they got to peak physical performance, and then they had to. You have to differentiate yourself with the technical aspect. In Africa, in the African world of football, it's very different. And so this guy, the white magician, he basically comes in. He was hired the first time for Ivory Coast, and they won the African Cup of Nations, which is not an easy thing.
Okay.
And then he's the only manager to ever win the African Cup of Nations with two different teams. Okay. Like they hired him for another team. I don't remember if it was Senegal or maybe Cameroon. And he won again the African Cup of Nations. And after, like, he fell in love with Africa. He talks about he married a Senegalese woman. Yeah. And like
where's he from?
I think he's French or from the Netherlands, maybe.
Europeans.
And so Europeans. And so he fell in love with Africa, and then the Saudis came to him and told him, like, we need you. Like, this is how much money we're gonna pay you. Come here, like, work for us. This guy's 54 years old, and he spends literally 5 hours a day in the gym. Man. Like he spends more time in the gym than his players. Like his players say it constantly in every team that he's gone to. Like it's crazy how much time he spends in the gym compared to us. Like he's better physically than we are. And his thesis is basically as follows. He says, look, we're never going to win the technical battle. They have years experience and way better players than we do. We're going to win the physical battle. You guys are going to be the most unrelenting Terminator kinds of players possible, and they are. Like the Saudi Arabian team did not stop running the entire game. The mentality was just absolute, like, we will not stop running. They can score 8 goals and we will not stop running. We will outrun you. And they did, like, by a mile. Like the second half, usually teams are already tired. Saudi Arabia was like the first second minute of the game, they were like running. So it was deserved. So they deployed an effective strategy. The incentives were there. The incentives is, I'm going to give you a lot more money if you keep doing what I know you can do. So I think that if you couple your incentives with your expectations properly, like you have the expectation of probably losing, but if you do your job right and you keep close to your incentives, you can probably beat the odds. Exactly. I think that's the best.
I agree.
Possible.
But then you said something interesting, which is like, although they did somehow expect to lose to a certain extent, like, in order for them to actually, have a proper incentive and for the incentive to work, is that they actually had some expectation to win. Come on, it was low.
Yes, but you have to have some hope.
You need to have something. You need to have some motivation, because otherwise, no matter the incentive that you have, it's not going to work.
Well, I've talked about this in my other podcast. The last episode that came out is about liking the struggle. And one of the things, it's from the Huberman Lab podcast, from this episode about dopamine, where he says, look, the best thing you can do to make yourself work out is to realize that the moment where your dopamine is highest is not when you win. It's the moment before you win. It's the moment when you're playing. Dopamine is a thing that exists in your body to help you deal with pain. It's to help you deal with doing difficult things. So whenever you are running, it was about a study of people who were asked to run without any prompt. They were told, run and just run. And after 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes, they stopped because your brain doesn't see a goal. Exactly. Your brain doesn't see. And then there's a hormone that builds up in your brain. And at some point, your body just screams at you to stop. And we've all been there. Seriously? You're running and your body's like, stop! And you have to. And then dopamine gets rid of it, like, or counteracts the effect of that hormone. And his point is, like, whenever you are exercising, you have to remind yourself when it's getting really difficult. Oh, this is the hard part. This is the part I should be enjoying the most. And it's crazy. You have no idea how crazy it is. You just get up and you do it. and I've been running every time I go to the gym. I run 1 kilometer in 10 minutes.
Okay.
I run 10 minutes and I see how far I can go. I was doing a solid 1 kilometer a minute. Yeah, 1 kilometer after 10 minutes. And I'm doing 1.25 now. And at this point, it's me running as fast as I humanly can. And whenever I'm like, my legs are numb, I really want to stop. I'm like, oh, this is the hard part. And I've started doing it in other aspects of my life. Like, I don't want to go to university right now. This class is so boring. This is the hard part. It just like lights me up. It's like, oh my God, yes.
The brain.
The brain helping you.
The brain.
I don't know what you think. Do you have any moments in your life that you think you've mastered your balance between incentive and expectations?
Again, como todo el sistema del ejercicio para mí ha sido super como nurturing, and it's taught me a lot about like discipline. During COVID, I was at my best physically, and I was able to exercise solid like 6 times a week, even sometimes twice a day. Like that's how much I was doing. Especially when I train como the muscles that I like, that's a thing, yeah.
Yes, I can carry this much weight.
It's literally como when you feel the pain, you're like, I'm doing the work. So como que the effort's paying off. This is a signal that I'm gonna get the results. Absolutely. And also when you're studying super hard for an exam, and you're like, that part when you're like with your friends and you're like, Jesus Christ, this is complicated, and then you're like, but I love
get it. Yeah, 100%.
So absolutely. And I think like the point of this episode was to like try to figure out how to manage both incentives and expectations in order to maximize results and satisfaction.
Yeah.
Right? And first of all, I think my approach usually is generally quite realistic. And my reality is that I am optimistic, right? So when it comes to like life in general, I tend to have like a very optimistic expectation of things. Unless there's like a real threat against my expectations, which would more likely adjust to it. But I try not to set my mood down because of the future, you know. I used to do that a lot, and I'm like, no, focus on your present. Your future's going to be fine. Good expectations for the future. That's a problem for later, you know?
Yeah.
So, in terms of my incentives, it's always like the future also. Come on, where is this going to get me? That's my incentive, right? And there's this very cliche phrase of like, the sacrifices of today are the results of tomorrow.
100%.
Absolutely true, you know? So yeah, that's my approach. And also, for example, my boyfriend, he has a completely different approach. He's like pessimistic type.
Yeah, and I have a couple of friends who do that. Like, no expectations.
Exacto. For everything, he's like, yeah, but we don't know. Come on, we'll see. I don't think it's gonna be that good as you say. So I thought, come on, maybe a bit like, sometimes it's annoying. It's like numb. And he's like, yeah, but if you prepare for the worst, then
that's very French.
No one's gonna hurt you.
That's very, very French.
Bueno, pero es que es así. O sea, decía como que with people also. I tend to be the type of person who's always looking at the best of people.
Yeah.
And es lo que tú decías, tipo, you're innocent until proven guilty. For me, everyone is a nice person until they prove me otherwise. For him, everyone is mean until they prove otherwise. You see?
Like, it's not a bad policy, especially in like, there's specific aspects of my life in which I will definitely implement that first, but not in general.
Okay.
Not with friendships. With friendships, you're innocent until proven guilty, and if you're guilty, there's a proper punishment. It's not you are immediately decapitated. It is, well, what are we gonna do? I think that's beautiful. I think that we talked about, like, sometimes you get lucky too. Like, there's a lot of this. It's just luck, just figuring it out as you go. I think that right now, I've had moments where my incentives and expectations have been really high, and I've had to manage it. Like, I'm wearing my sweater from MUN from when I went to Harvard. We love UC Jimun.
Expectations were high.
Expectations were high, and I didn't win. And I know why I didn't win. It's not anything I did. I know that things happen in life, but the moment I remember feeling my face get really, not red because I don't get really red, but the pressure that I felt at people are looking at you. Don't react to this. Just take it in stride. Appreciate the good things about this. I think there's a lot more bravery in believing that people are good and having high expectations of them.
Right.
Not extremely high, but like good expectations of people. And, you know, having high expectations of yourselves and putting up incentives so that you do well, and allowing yourself to have that moment, that leap of faith, that moment where you're like, maybe this won't work. Maybe I will get past this. Maybe I won't. I think there's a lot of bravery, and it's such a human thing that I've allowed it into my life. I think I have a better balance of incentives than I did when I was doing MUN, and I have a better, also a better like handle on my expectations. By no means perfect, but I think I'm probably at the healthiest moment in my life in that sense.
But I also think like the other side of the spectrum is quite brave as well. Come on, deciding to live your life in a somehow alert mode. Verga.
In which sense?
So I think like, let's say this is, come on, what I was trying to explain before is like, I've talked about this with my boyfriend. He's like, look, I meet someone, right? And at the beginning, they can be nice, but I see something that I don't like, they go down. So como que, and they have to build their reputation back up.
Y bueno, la confianza se sube en escalera y se baja en ascensor.
Exacto. Y yo siento que yo soy distinto. O sea, I meet someone, they do something nice, do something sketchy, but I'm going to be like, mom, but maybe it's just one thing. So it's going to take a longer time for me to actually lose.
Yeah, but I think that maybe it has to be something about finding that balance. What we talked about, most of it's just luck. I think that living a radical life where everyone who makes a mistake shouldn't be around is a sad life to live. But I think that, and I've lived through being too positive about someone and then they proving me wrong time and time again, and me not being able to realize that's just not good for me. And I think that no one gets away with doing that. Nobody gets away with not seeing the balance between your expectations, your incentives, your results, and your satisfaction.
With ignoring your intuition?
Ignoring your intuition, 100%.
But my point was like, living your life on somehow like this, not pessimistic, but like, yeah, like lower expectation type of vibe, you know? I think it's also brave because like...
Yeah.
Also, I deposit a lot of my will and joy in the universe. And that's brave because things can go wrong. But at the same time, having the will to say, okay, everything or most of the things that happen are on me, that's also brave.
Yeah, and I think that, for example, for you and me, who are people who believe in people and who are very positive, being more negative is brave because we like being attached. There's something about being attached to someone and preferring to avoid the conflict that is a lot better. Yeah, that's a lot easier than actually doing it. Okay, so I think you're right. There's also bravery related to the other side of the coin. So
Así que bueno, nada. I don't think there's a recipe for success. I think this works differently for everyone. And also everyone has a different management of their luck. For some reason, some people feel themselves to be luckier than others. And I think that also has to do with expectations and incentives. But in the end, it's always about balance. And what we were saying before, you're not going to get away with, you know, ignoring the clear signals of...
that the world sends your way.
Yeah, exactly. That the future is not going to be as bright, or that the future is going to be brighter than you expect.
Yeah. So basically, nobody gets away
with anything.
Anything. Thank you very much. We'll see you again next week. Remember that we are on Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, Substack, and anywhere else you get your podcast from. We'll see you next week. Bye. 38 minutes.
Cool.